The Bureau of Afterlife Ambiguities. In the bustling corridors of the Bureau of Afterlife Ambiguities, Harold McNugget tapped at his keyboard while struggling to remember the last time he had seen actual sunlight. He was a 35-year-old data entry clerk, or as he liked to call himself, the noble steward of interdimensional clerical duties. To everyone else, he was just another menial public servant, just like the shifting shadows that seemed to haunt the corners of the office he worked in. Day in and day out, Harold's job consisted of processing forms filed by souls caught in the limbo of purgatory. "Oh, is this heaven? H-E-double-L?" read one form, attached to another marked decidedly "Do not enter." The bizarre requests never seemed to end. Yet, despite the incessant paperwork and the fluorescent lights that flickered ominously, Harold had grown fond of his role. After all, somebody had to make sure the paperwork was in order before sending the dearly departed off to their final destination. But today had felt different. Drawn by a sudden reel of curiosity, as if zapped by one of the many bizarre anomalies that adorned the office, Harold couldn't help but piece together what was really happening around him. "Wait a second," he muttered to himself, pondering a stack of forms that requested escaped souls looking to reclaim their earthly coffee habits. "This isn't a regular department, this is purgatory." His eyes widened as enlightenment flickered through him like a particularly shocking electric shock therapy. He glanced around. The ever-so-repetitive desk of Gillian, who haughtily coordinated the bureaucracy of sins, and the apathetic Ron, who reviewed limbo appeals while listening to soothing sounds of whale music. "Hey guys," Harold exclaimed, barely containing his excitement, "this is purgatory. We're stuck here forever doing paper—" But before he could finish, the intercom crackled to life with the unnerving voice of Ms. Jingles, aka Direct Supervisor, but more popularly known as Miss Management, who replied in a soothing, unearthly tone. "Harold, sweetheart, let's take a deep breath, shall we? Just remember, denial is an excellent coping mechanism, especially here." Harold blinked in bewilderment. "What? Are we actually—" "It's best you forget that notion. You wouldn't want to stir the spectral hornet's nest now, would you?" she replied, her smile dangerously toothy. Deciding against pulling the now disappearing file back from the ether, he grumbled, "I'll catch a memo on that later then." With barely a dose of daydreaming, Harold turned to his colleagues, inquiring about the candid nature of their eternal employment. However, a shroud of silence encapsulated the room, as if an impromptu mime convention had sprung up. Realization hit hard. They were all in on it. He could just imagine their conversations. "Oh, I do love my endless toil. The thrill of unauthorized afterlife adjustments truly adds to office charm." Or, "Hey, pass the form of guilt, would you? It's on aisle 5 next to the regret." Tired of being in limbo, both literally and figuratively, Harold decided to make a break for it. He slipped out from behind his desk without attracting the attention of his fellow enslaved souls. Dashing through the open doorway, his heart raced as he bolted past nomadic paperwork, flying through the air like flocks of lost souls. "What are you doing?" The papers seemed to screech, but he didn't stop. Behind him, he could hear the telltale screeches of his co-workers shrieking to Ms. Jingles. "She's going to demand reforms. We can't have anyone leaking this information." Desperate for freedom and a life, or afterlife, without forms, Harold raced down the narrow hallway lined with monotonous grey fog, ducking behind various ethereal filing cabinets that were too busy bickering over outstanding complaints. "Help! No help, only forms!" With a sharp turn at the elevator, he narrowly escaped confrontation with Ms. Jingles herself, who wielded an ominous stapler like a weapon and shouted, "Get back here, Harold!" Spurred on by fear and existential dread, he yanked the nearest emergency button that looked suspiciously like a glowing red doom button. With a clap of thunder, the elevator doors opened, and in a heroic leap worthy of any action flick hero, he vanished into the light of oblivion. Moments later, he found himself sprawled on the carpet of his mundane apartment, surrounded by the chaos of bills and unopened mail. It turned out that the ethereal escape had shattered the shackles of paperwork binding him, not to the freedom he hoped for, but instead to an even more ridiculous bureaucracy called adulting. Sighing, Harold reached for the nearest form, a request to cancel his gym membership, and thought, well, at least there's no fluorescent light here. And thus began the new era of Harold's life, where escaping purgatory had only led him into the paperwork of an entirely different,